Germany's economic, political, and military weakness before 1935 meant that foreign policy was carefully considered. Germany's economy is fragile, but recovering, and politically, Hitler was still consolidating power of the government, his party, and the military. With a small military before 1935, Germany was not a threat to any significant European state. In addition, Italy, France, and Great Britain, acting as the world's great powers, worked against Germany, restricting its ability to significantly affect world affairs. Nazism, primarily based on the beliefs and writings of Adolf Hitler, included many points, some of which changed through time. Many of these thoughts were not new and were either borrowed or expanded on by the Nazis. These beliefs included the Treaty of Versailles must be completely undone. All Germans should live in an expanded Germany called Pan-Germanism. Communism was a real threat to civilization and should be eradicated. Germany must have Lebensraum, or living space, in Eastern Europe for more food and land for settling. Non-Germans were inferior racially to Germans who were born to conquer and rule others, although certain Germans were also undesirable or labeled as non-German, such as disabled people, homosexuals, and Jews. Democratic states were fundamentally weak and greedy. All German governments since 1919 had wanted to undo the Treaty of Versailles and regain territory lost to Poland. The Locarno treaties are a great example of how previous governments worked diplomatically to regain losses from the First World War. The idea that Germans should live in Germany came from the 19th century too. Previous German governments also feared communism and had suppressed communist uprisings. Living space was also an old idea. During the First World War, Germany defeated Russia and gained control of much of Eastern Europe. As you can see, this is a map of what Germany considered its natural homelands, its pan-Germanism. Here's Germany proper. The blue territories count as what Prussia was in the 1800s when they began to unify Germany. If you remember unification, it's going to leave Austria out and Liechtenstein too. And this yellow area symbolizes the territory under Austria. So if you consider for a moment, and they will do this, Germany unifying under one. Oh, and this is parts of Poland bordering all the way to the USSR. Here's the USSR. Let's see if I can do this and waste your... Okay, there you go. USSR over there. So this was very intimidating for both France over here and the Soviet Union over here. So you can almost see what's going to take place in World War II. Scary things. Racism was also not a new concept in Germany, but the Nazis made it state policy. Laws now institutionalized racism in Germany. For example, with Jewish Germans were now denied citizenship. One historian even took it further and attached racism to political control and the rise of fascism, and he wrote, "It was the complete denial of the rule of the majority, which Hitler considered the rule of the stupid and incapable masses and their representatives." According to Hitler, the ideas of democracy and equality were promoted by Jews in order to destroy a nation. "There must be no majority decisions," he said. "Surely every man will have advisors by his side, but the decisions will be made by one man." More importantly, Hitler indeed believed that Western democracies, such as France and Great Britain, were fundamentally weak. This weakness was the result of the very nature of democracy, in which political parties had to compromise and listen to their public to be elected. This was a contrast to Germany and Italy, both of which were ruled by dictators who had little need to pacify the public or various interests. They saw their system as stronger in that they could act quickly and decisively based on a single philosophy or overall goal. Poland was far more powerful in military terms than Germany in 1934. It was also allied to France, and it was fully aware that Germany desired to regain territories granted to Poland in the Treaty of Versailles. Poland felt that with its large army and its alliance with France, it had nothing to fear from Germany. Poland also did not want to be drawn into a conflict with Germany in support of France. Its main focus was the Soviet Union. This led to an agreement between Germany and Poland. In January 1934, in the Polish-German Non-Aggression Pact, each state guaranteed that it would not attack the other for a period of 10 years. It also led to recognition by Germany of Poland's borders, better diplomatic relations to discuss disputes, and increased trade between the two states. For Germany, this treaty meant that it no longer needed to fear the Polish military. In addition, it clearly weakened the alliance between France and Poland in that France could no longer assume that its partner was inherently hostile to Germany, which had been a threat to both states up to that point. More trade between Poland and Germany benefited both states. Poland was a source of food and metals that the German economy desperately needed. Poland's primary enemy was the Soviet Union, which it had fought a successful war that ended in 1920, effectively doubling the size of Poland. In the 1920s and 1930s, Poland continued to work against the Soviet Union by encouraging revolts and independence movements there, all unsuccessful. The second five-year plan of the Soviet Union was already in progress, and the future industrial and therefore military might of the Soviet Union needed to be observed and potentially opposed if Polish independence was threatened. This treaty with Germany allowed Poland to deploy its armies in the east of the country where any Soviet invasion would naturally come from. While the British response to the pact was muted, France was outraged. The alliance between France and Poland had clearly been weakened, but France had also been reminded that Poland would pursue whatever policy was in its own interest without consulting France or regarding France's needs. There was little that France could do, but one result may have been to draw France somewhat closer to the Soviet Union, which was now ending its isolation in response to the pact as well. The Soviets had worked to maintain good relations with Germany throughout 1933, but cooperation between the two states collapsed with the Polish-German Non-Aggression Pact. Poland and the Soviet Union had no diplomatic relations and considered each other their main enemy. The pact meant that the Polish military could concentrate its border with the Soviet Union and perhaps even attack it in the future. The earlier cooperation between Germany and the Soviet Union meant that there had always been a possibility of an alliance between the two to oppose Poland and perhaps seize territories that both believed belonged to them. It was now feared that Germany and Poland might even create an alliance to seize parts of the Soviet Union. The Soviet reaction to the pact was to join the League of Nations in 1934. It had previously condemned the League as simply a tool for Britain and France to maintain their empires and as a means of promoting the business interest of capitalist countries. It now sought to support the concept of collective security, although this idea had already been damaged by the Manchurian crisis. In addition, Stalin ordered the Comintern to alter its language and mission. Instead of advocating revolution, it now promoted peace, democracy, and anti-fascist governments. Communist groups were ordered to cooperate with non-fascist political parties in order to oppose fascist groups and governments. This happened in Spain, France, and other countries almost immediately. The Soviet response to Japanese, German, Italian, anti-communist dictatorships was to build positive relations with other countries, most of which distrusted the Soviets and opposed communism, leading to limited success. A goal of many in Austria and Germany after the First World War was to unite the two countries. This was a step towards creating a larger Germany, a goal of many nationalists since the 19th century, so that there would be one state for all Germans. Perhaps more importantly for Hitler, Austria was his original homeland, not Germany. By merging the two states, he would be, in a sense, more German. Fortunately for Hitler, Austria was politically divided, weak state that had recently experienced severe fighting between paramilitaries representing different political factions. Many in Austria may have desired the stability that the Nazi Party would bring. An Austrian branch of the Nazi Party had been active until it was banned in 1933. In June 1934, Hitler met Mussolini and tried to convince him that Austria should become a German satellite state. Italy was a major political and military power and shared a long border with Austria. When Mussolini rejected this idea, which contradicted his own plans for Central and Eastern Europe, Hitler gave the Austrian Nazis strong, unofficial encouragement to stage a coup a month later. During the failed coup, Austria's head of state, Chancellor Dollfuss, was assassinated. Mussolini was determined to keep Austria as a buffer state between Italy and Germany. He may have also been eager to demonstrate to Britain and France that Italy was a powerful and important ally. He immediately immobilized troops on the Italian-Austrian frontier and forced Hitler to speak against the coup, which then promptly failed. Hitler was unable and unwilling to risk military intervention in Austria, not the least because he did not have complete control of the army. Any military action against Austria might also cause other states to intervene. The failed annexation of Austria was a setback for Hitler, but it is impossible to know the general reaction to this in Germany. The state controlled all media, and opposition parties that might have protested had been banned. What was clear, however, is that Germany was weak in 1934 and unable to affect international affairs to its liking. Germany's efforts to take over Austria, however, meant that relations between Germany and Italy were strained at best. Italy was determined to cooperate with Britain and France to keep Germany weak and under control. The Saar was an iron and coal-rich region of Germany that bordered France. It was placed under administration of the League of Nations after the First World War, and France was allowed to operate and prosper from its coal mines. This was done to compensate France for coal mines destroyed by Germany in northern France during the war. The League of Nations held a plebiscite in the Saar region in January 1935, in which residents of the Saar could vote to rejoin Germany, remain under the League of Nations administration, or merge with France. Over 90% of voters indicated that they wished to rejoin Germany. This vote was celebrated in Germany, and Hitler seems to have believed that it indicated support for his policies and government. While Mussolini continued to build up forces to invade Abyssinia, both Germany and Britain had been busy as France in breaking up the unity of the Stresa Front. By concluding the Anglo-German Naval Treaty in June of 1935, this completely contradicted the declarations at Stresa made just 2 months before. Britain believed that it achieved a diplomatic victory because the treaty would limit German Navy to only 35% of the size of the British Navy, while Britain began massive rearmament. In the British view of the treaty, Germany would always have a small fleet that could never challenge the British for control of the seas militarily or threaten their merchant fleet. This had the added advantage of tying Germany by allowing its limited resources and expensive raw material imports on ships that would never be able to challenge Britain's substantial navy. The Anglo-German Naval Treaty must be seen in the context of British diplomacy, which worked to treat Germany as a state with legitimate concerns, yet limit its overall power so that it could not be a challenge to Great Britain. Italy and France, however, believed that German rearmament had been encouraged, and the Treaty of Versailles had been violated with the British consent. This brought France and Italy temporarily closer together, and in mid-1935 there were talks about mutual military cooperation in case of war with Germany. The Stresa front was severely damaged as a result of the diplomacy of France and Britain, but collapsed completely with the Italian invasion of Abyssinia and economic sanctions placed on Italy. In the end, Nazi ideology heavily influenced its foreign policy. The idea of pan-Germanism is very popular in Germany, that all German speakers should be within a German government. Most German citizens agreed with ending the Treaty of Versailles. It was very humiliating. Most of them were anti-communist and, very much feared that. And a lot of them considered areas that had been taken from the League of Nations legitimate German living space. Racial superiority had existed in Germany for a long time, and it helped form some of the policies we'll later see. Democracies were weak in this period, and Hitler exploited that. They had a difficult time reacting to the Great Depression. And so that caused it to make agreements with Poland or attempt to unify with Austria, hold a plebiscite in the Saar region, and even negotiate a treaty with Great Britain, all of which forced Germany into a far more aggressive foreign policy post 1935.